It's going.
All right, I would like to welcome everyone to the advisory committee meeting. And the first order of business is the approval of minutes from the previous meeting. Has everyone had any opportunity to review the minutes?
Are we going to take a quick look at it?
Pull it up. Hold on. All right. Are you looking at the minutes or the agenda?
That'd be the minutes, Karen.
Okay.
Has everyone had the opportunity to review the minutes now? And if so, are there any changes or clarifications requested by any of the board or the committee members? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
And a motion by Ms. Leonard and a second by, excuse me, who was that?
Me, Bruce.
Mr. Blue, how are you today?
Fine, how you,
So
sir?
motion is second. Any additional discussion required?
Nope.
Hearing none, we'll just do a yay or nay vote. All in favor? Yay.
Yay.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on. We have the online board report. Mr. Flood, would that be you?
It would. Give me just a moment and let me see if I can't get the appropriate PowerPoint up. Does everyone see the PowerPoint right here?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so the first thing on the 109 board that's kind of outstanding business was, if people remember, we started to discuss this 2 meetings ago, and that was about variable rate pricing. And the question that was called was, does what is reported in the annual report take into account all the different variables and create a accurate picture of what is going on? And I think, Brian, I think this was brought to us from the 109 board, which originated from Mr. Lee. So if I'm off on that assessment of what the question was and the concerns about making sure that we take into account the different factors, please correct me if I'm wrong. So variable rate pricing, and this is the definition from definitions and section of the ordinance that talks about this. So the first thing is that all private waste haulers operating within the county must, as a condition of their license, have a variable service rate pricing structure for their respective residential customers. So on our annual reporting, we ask, what is the average rate per household for garbage, recycling, and yard waste? So when you go back to the definition, so what is variable service rate? It's a collection service pricing structure that allows customers to choose the frequency of collection and or the number of containers that may be placed out for collection. Now, I'm not sure that we really meet that definition of what variable service rates are, but we are asking basically, what is your pricing? What is your average pricing in Louisville Metro? So our last discussion was, well, do we have to do this? Why do we do this? And what would we like to know? And eventually we did get to the what do we want to know. So I think one of my tasks is to go back and look at the different service levels that are in the county from the study. And that's what I have done. So when I looked at it, and it is part of the study, and I can pull it up if you guys want, there are a lot of different scenarios. And, you know, it goes from, and it's not necessarily a lot of different things, it's just how it's purchased or supplied. So you can have one area that has garbage and yard waste, and it's paid in a bundle. You can have that one area with all inclusive under one price. You can have, you know, you can set out one item every week, or you can set out one item every month. So even to handicap service to backdoor service. So it really did bring into a lot of different variables in the way that it can, you know, goes into these average prices. So trying to put together something that would get to the bones of what we're looking for, I have put together this. And remember, this does not only include the pricing, but it includes the number of households, which is also another section if we need to go into that. But waste haulers have to report the number of households as well. We use that to determine the total participation and see how many people don't have service. It's a requirement of the state. So in this scenario, and this is just a rough draft, guys, I've looked at this a lot, so I'm open for any suggestions. So keeping similar to the way we do it now, garbage service, once per week service, how many households? And unfortunately, that part didn't make it into the slide, but what I'm asking for under once per week, I'm asking households served once per week. Households, and what that average cost is.
Could you increase the size just a touch?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I can't.
You can do that on your own screen. Everybody should have controls on the left-hand side of your screen.
Okay. I've been trying to do it with my fingers. You're right. There's a zoom in and zoom out.
I'll
Thank
be
you.
damned. There
Thank
it
you.
is.
We all learned something today.
That
So,
works.
so just remember that means households once per week, number of households serviced once per week. I would like to see it broken down from subscription to contract to multi-unit residential and then to businesses.
Hey, what about twice a week pickup?
Okay, so that next column is how many households do you service on a twice per week contract? And then what is the average cost? And I do that in recycling as well, once per week recycling. And then instead of twice a week recycling, I do every other week recycling, which I think is probably the predominant way to do things. And then yard waste is fairly simple, doing it the same thing. How many households do you service in yard waste once per week and then every other week? And we're just looking for those household counts is the major thing. Now, I could, at this point, I could have made this spreadsheet go over another 15 spots if I wanted to list all the different scenarios. So I look at those three, garbage, recycling, and yard waste, as the base service, the major base services. And then at the bottom, I list backdoor service. And I'm not looking to duplicate household numbers from up at the top. These are standalone. How many people do you have on backdoor service? And what is the average cost of that backdoor service? The same thing.
How is that separate from, I mean, what if you have backdoor garbage and recycling? How can they be a separate number of households?
Well, one is going to be used as the number of households that we report as having basic garbage, recycling, or yard waste. The bottom section is just to kind of give us a flavor of how these services impact the costing part. Does that make any sense?
The costing does, it's the household thing. When you said that the households, you didn't want to duplicate the ones above, that's where you lost me.
No, I think I think I didn't say
misspoke.
that right. I didn't say that right. What I mean is that it can be duplicate of what's up there. It'll be the total of customers that you do with backdoor service, and then what that average cost is. And by doing that, we can multiply the number of households and the average cost and really see what kind of an impact it has on the overall number, if it's big or if it's low. The next year we can come back if we find some surprises and we can change it a little bit to maybe we move backdoor service up there where twice a week service is, because twice a week is something that's not done very much. When I looked at the study, and twice a week really was only in maybe 2,500 households throughout the county. It's really not something that's done very much. So we'll have to see after the first year if you guys like this idea. So that's what I'm putting out there as a solution. I think it will tell us the different varying prices that are out there. You know, we've always looked at things like the urban service district costs, contracted cost, or home rule city cost, and then the subscription service, and those three different sectors. So that's what I was trying to get to. I'm a little iffy on how we're doing multi-unit residential. I would love some input from the haulers as to how they could track that, because what may be considered a multifamily residential property could be a little bit different. In the urban services district, we consider 9 units and more as being more a multi-unit residential property that does not cannot have our services. So that's why I have dumpsters, because I think it gives a little bit of separation from the two. And keep in mind, it's not perfect science here. We'll never get perfect, but we're getting a snapshot of what we see out there. So thoughts and ideas.
Actually, I really like it. I would be interested in what your cover letter would say, because the format and everything is really excellent. But I think that it needs to have a cover when it goes out that indicates that if they have questions to call you, that if there are duplications in the numbers in some of the columns, that they should indicate that for you. That if the costs are, if there are difficulties in arriving at the cost, because especially down in the bottom of other, that they communicate with you so that when you're done, we know what we're looking at.
Yeah, I agree. This is a snapshot of the data. It is part of another report that they complete, and it's done through Retract Connect, which is an online system. And we do get a lot of calls for this. But yeah, I agree that we need to definitely have the context there and what we're looking for, and where we can get where people can get questions answered, because consistency in the way that people report is very important.
Mhm.
If I may add to Sandra's comment, I think it's going to be important that you clarify to each waste hauler why and what this information is going to be used for. And because it is going to become a matter of public record and will be attainable by all. So information would be great.
I think that we can do that. I think that two things. This goes to an annual report that is required by the state, and that goes back to your public record. Not a lot of people chase after that report, and we don't go and advertise individual company rates. We range it, or we aggregate it. So that's another thing to keep in mind. But yeah, I think everybody should be, if they're not already aware, that this does go into a state required report.
Well, I think one of my concerns would be if I was a waste hauler, would be if this was exposing all of my individual rates to my competitors. Now, if it goes into an aggregate report, I would think it doesn't. Is that correct?
It
would
goes
agree.
into an aggregate report when I report it locally. It does go to the state as individual, in their individual form. And their individual form is a little bit different. You know, we got the form and the way that we collect the data, and then we transfer that into the state form. So when the other part of that, Sandra, I think is important, is to remember that we're not asking for the individual contract prices necessarily. We're asking for the average across contracted, the average, because the price in one part of the county is definitely different than the price in another part of the county. And based upon these different factors. So we are just looking for averages. So I mean, you might be able to tell a little bit from it, but we're really trying to get the 10,000 foot image of what's going on.
And you've always done a good job, Pete, at protecting companies' identities by using hauler 1 through 5, yada, yada. So we appreciate that. I just wanted to bring that instance up to maybe put in your cover letter.
Question, is it the case that haulers are imposing some sort of a surcharge on disabled customers, and is that legal with the ADA law?
Well, I would let Bruce and them discuss that. My understanding is sometimes it's a deduction, but I'll let Bruce answer that.
We provide what the customer requests, and we bid a rate accordingly. If that is going to require additional labor, then that is justified in our pricing, Sarah Lynn. We're certainly not penalizing, as you know, I would be the first one to object to that. We're not penalizing people with disabilities. It's just the amount of money that it costs to cover our extended labor times, if there are any, for those situations.
And I'm interpreting then that any additional charges are largely externalized across everybody in that small city?
Yes.
Bruce, can I butt in here a minute? Most
Certainly.
contracts have free services or reduced services for X number of people that are disabled or need special services. So it's just the opposite of what you're saying.
Good,
It's exactly the opposite.
thank you.
Going back to the rough draft in front of us, as you were talking, if you want an average cost, are you talking about an average cost per one of the units? Or are you
Yeah.
talking about an average cost across all of the units in an individual line?
It is for the individual household.
I think then that I would clarify that a little bit, because I can interpret it now as you want a number for once a week. Let's say subscription is 100 for the sake of argument, and then you want an average cost across the 100 for the second area. Is that correct?
Say that again. Want to make
Well,
sure I
let's
understand.
let's do garbage service subscription. Let's say once a week that I put 100 into that once a week.
100 households.
Right. And then when I get to average cost, it's the average cost over those 100.
Yes, it would be the average cost per household. So in a sense, you may have 50 of those 100 having a price of $20 a month.
I understand.
And yeah, so what we're
Right.
looking for is the overall sum divided by the number of households to give us the average cost per household. You know, the other way to do that, and I thought about it, was not only to ask for the average cost, but to ask for the high and ask for the low.
Oh, don't do that. I get stuff from KLC all the time that does that, and interpreting it is awful.
Well, that's why it's really not on here. And
Good, thank you.
the other part of this is that keep in mind that parts of this chart did not make it over into my thing. So it would have headers on it that would explain this a little bit
A
better.
little bit more.
Mhm. My apologies on that.
No, I think it looks really good.
Hey, Pete,
Yes, sir.
a question on multi-unit residential. What number of units does that include? How many?
Well, the ordinance definition would be 9 or more. But here's the issue that because it does get complicated. I know that there's some contracts out there that say that they will service multi-units, 4 units or less, or four or more units. So the definition is not universal. The ordinance, I think, was written more towards the urban services district. So I do think that that's something that we should define a little bit better as to what constitutes a multifamily property. And does it, typically that would be apartments. But you also have condominiums that are out there too. And condominiums, when you look at them, they're paid individually to a certain extent. So they're single family homes, even though they're in a building with 100 units. So they're handled a little bit differently. But I don't know how that would equate to the people that are looking it up for their individual system and how their system tracks it. I think that there's some difficulties there. And I would certainly look for some consistent wording suggestions from the private haulers that have to get this data.
Okay, from a private hauler perspective, a residential contract would typically include a 4-plex or 4 units or less. It becomes a commercial establishment when you get over that side because typically they have dumpsters. They do not have hand collections or residential services.
How
As a
many units,
general rule.
Brian? Say it again. How many units, please?
Generally, I would say the average, Sarah Lynn, is 4 units or less,
Wow.
up to a 4-plex. If you have, 30 units, 40 units, 100 units or more, it's typically commercial services, not what we would characterize as residential services. So that's why I was asking the question.
Yeah.
I think it comes, that is the crux of the issue, is it is considered commercial because obviously it's apartments. But the city delineates that at 8 units or less is residential.
So shouldn't we ask the respondent to delineate how they define their responses so that we get the most accurate data, even if it makes it complicated to aggregate?
Well, I think my question would be, are we gonna get that different of an answer? And the only
Right.
people that can really do that is, I guess, from a private hauler standpoint, what is your price difference between somebody that's in a 4-plex versus somebody that's in a 8-plex? Are we trying to cut it just too close? And trying to keep it fact that we're trying to collect data. We don't want to overrun ourselves with it. So what is the difference in the cost from a 4-plex to an 8-plex? Is it a huge deal? When you average it, let me add that caveat.
Is the question, is the pricing significantly different?
Yes.
No. No, but typically, when you get to 8 units or more, we would, and I would assume Rumpke, Waste Management, other commercial haulers, they typically move into what we would call the dumpster segment or commercial services. There would be only a very small number, in my mind, of units like that that would have residential collection that would have more than, let's just use your 8-unit number. They just don't have it because it becomes cumbersome. Now, I would say for the commercial collectors, if you had a unit where you had, let's just say 20 apartments and they were all being serviced with a toter and a recycling toter, those are probably individual and they're billed separately. So they would show up on our billing rosters, for example, as one customer because they're billed separately.
Okay,
Does that make sense, what I just said?
it does.
It would be an individual customer with an individual unit that has their own toter and their own recycling bin.
Can I do this? Can I reach out individually to the individual haulers that collect curbside and residential and businesses and front loads and kind of get their opinions on the way that they do it? And then I can come back and say with a better recommendation, because I think we have, at least from my standpoint, the very definitions or the way that people track things causes me problems in trying to make sense of data.
Yeah, certainly, understood. Yeah, I'm
Pete,
sure
I
we'd all
would
be
welcome-
receptive. Sorry, Bruce.
Yeah. Pete, you're more than welcome to come down to the office. I can hook you up with our ops manager and residential supervisor, because I know there's a lot of fourplexes
Upstairs at the
that
top
we
right
service
hand, we have
with
to click
commercial containers.
Okay, I could do that individually.
I'm sure there's none in there. They should be in there, the real good ones.
I have a naive question. It's not like you haulers have price sheets you could send Pete. It varies too much to have such a thing, right? It's not like you can go to LG&E or MSD and say, give us your tariff schedule. It's much more complicated for you all, right? Or individualized might be a better word.
I would say you're correct.
Okay, thank you.
So if that's okay, that's what I'll do. And I will come back at the next meeting. We can kind of table this for another meeting, and I can come back with a little bit more information.
I don't think we have a choice. We need to do that.
Okay. So we can go to the next item on the agenda, if that's okay, Bruce?
Do you need a motion to that effect, or can you just do it?
I don't think I need a motion for that.
Cool.
And
Next item on the agenda is, let's see, we have, under new business, we have the has-been requests from a business.
I got you.
Would you like
Okay.
to speak?
So I do not have a slide for this, so I'm going to jump off of this sharing for a minute. And here's the situation. And the reason that it's here is because there's going to be a request made to the board. And I understand that I just want to have, I think if I don't, the board's going to ask it to come back here anyway. So I'm trying to expedite a little bit. We have a request from a business, not necessarily, she won't call herself a business, but she is collecting fees. And what she wants to do is collect residential household waste and be able to dispose of it at the has-been. I have some concerns. Legally, she has jumped through every hoop, and she's been doing it now for about 3 months, and that goes back to that conversation of responsibility that we was kind of having in our other committee. My concern, number one, is that, is this a business? Is this something that we really want to do? Because there can be a lot of people out there making money going around and picking up stuff for a fee and bringing it to us to dispose of it for free. And while we definitely don't want household hazardous materials in the waste stream, it does accomplish one of our goals. but is it really fair? Is it something that you guys think is, as a waste district, that we should allow?
Pete, does she have a license and insurance and all that?
I talked to her about insurance. I talked to her about DOT and liability reasons. What if she has a wreck? What if she has a wreck with this truckload of household hazardous materials?
Right. And what
Explosion.
kind of truck is she using? You know, you got to have a special truck sometimes to haul hazardous waste.
Yeah, and she is in the hazardous waste field. And I feel like that what she's trying to do is carve out a niche and start a business, but she's trying to do it a little bit on the cheap.
Yeah.
And so that's a little bit my concern. I'm just uncomfortable with it. And I kind of wanted to get some opinions before the next board meeting so that to help me to give the board a little bit of advice.
So am I interpreting correctly? We don't really have an existing rule to answer this question?
Mm.
Okay.
We typically discourage people from getting waste from other people or even doing collection events at churches and transferring all that stuff to us in the back of a truck just because of their own liability reasons. But that has not deterred in this regard.
I mean, she's effectively a business, and I thought we didn't allow businesses to bring stuff to has-been. Is that right?
That is true. She's not calling herself a business. See, I can't remember the word that she used, but it was community service. She was doing a community service.
But she's charging a fee, you said?
Are they paying her?
They are giving her a little bit of money.
That's not a
Donations.
community
It's
service.
a business.
And she has a federal tax ID number.
What if it's donations?
Is she a registered charity?
I can't answer that question. That's a good question.
She's got to have a tax ID number.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, the tax ID number.
So I can tell you from my experience, even as being a nonprofit, I'm still required to follow DOT laws and regulations for any vehicles we own or drive or lease or whatever. And regardless of her status from, a waste standpoint, like DOT, she would have to follow all the requirements, whether she's a business, a charity, otherwise. I mean, even if she was doing it 100% free, DOT wouldn't approve her to do that. So I would suggest that we defer this until she gets adequate DOT licensing to haul hazardous waste. That, we tell her that's the first step, so it doesn't put the onus on us to say no, because DOT won't bat an eye at saying no to her.
And she's got to have a truck that's enclosed that it can't get out.
Mhm. Placards, all this other stuff. She's gonna have to have HAZWOPER training. I mean, to haul hazardous waste, like there's a lot of legwork that goes along with it. During
Stickers.
transportation, storage, the whole.
Trust me, I understand all that stuff. She says that she has Whopper trained. She's got a lot of training in a lot of those regards because she's already doing it as part of her job,
Her day job, you mean?
her day job.
Boy.
So she understands. She's carving out a niche, which is really kind of ingenious, to be honest with you, but I'm not sure if it's something that we want to do.
I wonder what her employer would say.
We all get requests periodically from residents to come transferred household hazardous waste. And we do not do that. I think that the jeopardy that we put ourselves in is that's creating how many people then commercially, if they were qualified, could actually transport all kinds of household hazardous waste to has-been. And somebody mentioned that, Sarah Lynn or somebody earlier, or Ted. I would not be in favor of even going that far to encourage her to get a license. I think the rule is it has to be deposited by residents of Jefferson County, and that's how it was designed. That would be my professional opinion on that.
And if they come back,
I
to us as a
100%
committee,
agree, Brian. I 100% agree on that.
Okay.
I mean, what would
I
her
think we should
employer
stay
say?
as far away from this as possible. That sounds very, I don't know, sketchy.
I didn't hear the first part of that, Marie. Can you say again?
There are a lot of questions, and I think everybody's comments are legit. I would love for this to be able to happen, but it just sounds a little too good to be true. And she would be a has weight hauler. I mean, how would she get it to the has been? I mean, I'm thinking of just the placards and the truck itself, just that simple of a thing.
Yeah, I'm sure what she's going to say is she's already got all that figured out, and she understands about placarding, she understands about manifesting, and the whole 9 yards. But to me, if you're manifesting, it's a regulated waste. It becomes a regulated waste.
Well, it's fine to understand the rules, but if you're ignoring them, it strikes me as irrelevant.
Maria, yeah, Maria, I think you had a question.
What about an attorney and their opinions? Don't we have an attorney for our group?
We do. I don't think that this would be the specialty of the county attorneys. I think that what we have to do is kind of lean on the state and the DOT as to their opinions on what can take place here. But a really good comment that Brian made was that if we allow it in this regard, what's to stop other people from doing it for free, and then we're overrun?
Well,
It might be a great thing to have all this hazardous waste, but it doesn't work if our first bill doing this turns into $1 million. Because
I'm going to say the liability, I mean, she should have to have some sort of protection in case she ends up screwing up. And otherwise, the taxpayers are going to be held responsible for cleanup, and that's not fair.
Thank you all very much. Unless anybody has any other comment, I'm ready to move on.
One thing we have to be mindful of too is that, you know, it's set up for homeowners, but what's to stop, you know, a business like this from taking waste from a small quantity generator, you know, an office that has cleaning supplies, things that, you know, have been sitting around for a while, and now we're using tax dollars to pay for disposal of business stuff. And we have no assurance coming from someone like this that is where the waste was actually generated from a homeowner, you know. And I think that having homeowners bring it there and they show their driver's license, you know, they could be bringing it from work, whatever, but it's more of an assurance that we're spending the tax dollars, you know, or, you know, the dollars we're spending on this properly and not for business purposes. We're not helping a business, you know, have a niche. So I think that's also an important thing to look at from this.
She gets an A for creativity.
Thank you guys very much. I do very much appreciate the input here.
Very good. Thank you all. The next item on new business is recycling commodity pricing updates.
I don't have a slide for this either because I was not able to pull up the commodity pricing for our region. But I did send an article that shows, and I think that anecdotally what I will just say here, and then maybe I'll ask Bruce and Kim Martinez, if she's here, to elaborate on the direction of recyclable commodities and where they're going. And it's definitely in the positive right now. Things have definitely improved. And from my understanding, the outlook for the next 18 months is pretty good as well. So I think that the checkpoint and when China did what it did, it forced the domestic recycling and manufacturers and users create probably a much stronger system because we're able to handle a lot of our stuff domestically now. And I think that the different mills that have popped up, the different things that while we're not shipping recyclable material to China, the material is still going there. It's just been processed like paper. It's moved into pulp instead of mixed paper. And that way they can ensure their quality standards, but they still need the material. So unless Bruce or Kim, and I don't see Kim on the list, have any additional, I just want to say that it feels like the commodities have rebounded and we're in a good spot.
Yay.
They're very high, going to stay high for a while. Problem is they're not getting enough scrap and they don't have enough employees to handle what they get.
Bruce Burrow, you got anything?
No, I would agree with your assessment. Currently, the commodity prices are favorable in comparison to what they were when the green shield went down. And we have a considerable amount of money domestically, as have overseas companies invested considerable dollars domestically. So
I can tell you our minimum price for cans is 65 cents a pound. That's our minimum price.
Wow.
That's as high as it's been in a long time.
what's mixed shredder scrap going for, Bruce?
Ever. I'll find out and call you.
I think it's around 260. So that's a good gauge when you're getting that kind of money out of metal. Fiber is 145. So the commodity pricings are very good. Anything else on the subject?
Yeah, I would just mention the commercial side of that, and I appreciate that report you sent, Pete. The pricing is just definitely pressed upward, and we're really enjoying the fruits of that on our commercial industrial side. What we would like to see is from a curbside mixed recycling stream, we would like to see the processing costs come down to reflect that the markets have gone up. And we have not seen that yet. So our cost base on processing, collection, transportation has not diminished to the point that I think we're seeing the pricing rebounding, if that makes sense, on the curbside residential.
Brian, that's a really good point. I think that maybe the processing facilities are having staffing. They've had COVID and they've had to maybe slow the line down for quality. So I think there's probably quite a few pressures in trying to get that processing cost down. But hopefully, as we get more workers into the workforce, that maybe some of that will help some of that.
I think the other thing, Pete, we need to recognize is the Amazon effect on residential curbside has really bolstered the price of, or the value of those residential commodities to the point where we're back to putting as much material to the MRF as possible.
Excellent.
Bruce and Pete, one other thing this committee might consider is I would like to be, and Bruce, maybe your company is studying this, I would like to suggest one of the things we ought to do is look at the materials that I guess potentially are dragging down the costs. You know, is that plastics 3 through 7s, for example? Are there materials that we should consider excluding from the recycling stream that might improve, right, the costs so that pricing can be stabilized or reduced for the, for the individual customer? You know, that's something that, just from a review perspective, this committee might want to consider. Any thoughts on that, Bruce?
Yes, if you look at our acceptable commodity listing that we hand out to our residential customers, just take it for granted that we can profitably process those materials. They're not dragging down the price. It does vary from the other supplier in town with regard to their acceptable commodities.
I think one thing else to keep in mind is once you remove a commodity, adding it back is difficult. It creates an education nightmare that we already have in our recycling education and outreach programs. But I believe that there is such a hunt right now on for material uses and processes that we will soon have better outlets for those 3 through 7s. That's my thoughts on it. I wouldn't want to change it in the short term. I think it's going to resolve itself in the longer term. That's my opinion.
I think I've run recycling programs, and when you change the rules, it just takes a long time to get over it. So yeah, we should hesitate to do it.
Okay, next item on the agenda. And we have a discussion about having in-person meetings.
Okay, let me see. Can you guys, not yet. Okay, as of June 11th, Metro policy allows 100% capacity of in-person meetings, provided any person not vaccinated shall require a face covering. So it's difficult to police, and I know that it may be a little bit controversial, but it is possible. Now,
When you say policy, is that an ordinance or a law? Well, I haven't heard that.
that's for metro government buildings.
So it's a metro government building policy.
Yes, and I think that they derive that from state either executive orders or rules. So, which are honestly are still in effect when it comes to being able to meet virtually. But here's the other side of this is that from what Metro is hearing, many agencies are hoping to continue virtual meetings or to at least use virtual or technology in these meetings. And let me say this, the last thing I think that we want is a hybrid where you have some people in person and some people virtual. It never goes well in I think our experience. And I'll be honest with you, from a sustainability standpoint, from not having to travel to these meetings all the time, from a time management standpoint, staff would, correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, and any other staff here, it's much easier for us to do this virtually. Maybe we can do a once a quarter in person if people choose to, but honestly, I think that we can get more done through the virtual meetings. We have less chatter in the background. People the meetings tend to be fairly productive. So with that said, we'll be bringing this up at the board meeting next week. So trying to get the committee's opinion. What do we want to do? Do we want to continue to meet virtually, or do we want to transfer back to in person?
I don't know if this would apply so much to advisory committees or things of that nature, but in regard to the city council, if the person is coming into a hybrid meeting and their pictures cannot be seen on screen by the general public, they can participate in the meeting, but they can't vote. I don't know that that would apply to us so much. It might apply to the board.
There is those, and it does apply to us because we are considered a public meeting. So there is an opinion through the county attorney on how to handle the hybrid and what we can and can't do, even when I guess the executive order is released, and how we can conduct it. So I think that if we decide to do a hybrid, I would make sure that everybody got that opinion. But I'm really hoping that we don't want to go with a hybrid system.
If I put on my health department hat, we're about 2 months away from another big spike. It's already getting legs. And as much as I would like to meet virtually, I just don't think the pandemic is over enough for us to go there. And therefore, I think we ought to stay virtual.
I agree with Sarah Lynn and Pete in that these virtual meetings are, one, I think we've had pretty good attendance with them, and I think people have figured out the technical issues over the past year, and I think we can continue to do that. And I do think that, we're going to hurry to get back in the office just to go home again this fall. I think is where we're heading. The U.S. Postal Service is now requiring everyone to wear masks that go in there now. So we're already starting to see, mask mandates returning at a small level, and I don't think that'll be the end of it.
Yeah, one other thing that I would add is that, our building here is where we would conduct these meetings. And we have periodically, knock on wood, we haven't had anything in the past month that I'm aware of, but we periodically have outbreaks pick up. And, with the way that these guys are out there working, they're essential workers, but they have to ride together. They have to do certain things together. It's easy for it to take off, and there's a risk to it, and it can get into our buildings. And, we've had to have our building cleaned 4 to 5 times due to the outbreak. So my preference, again, I think that it is a little bit risky, and it's going in the wrong direction, unfortunately.
I make a motion, we continue to meet virtually.
Second the motion.
Second.
I'll third it.
We've got a second and a third, so thank you. Do we have any additional discussion necessary?
But my only discussion would be, we might want to think about, but we don't have to vote on a meeting maybe once a year, like a Christmas party or something like that, just to see that we're all alive and real, and it could be voluntarily, but it's the thought.
Well, and I want to say that I think from a public participation standpoint, we should presume that we eventually will go back to in-person meetings.
Oh, yeah.
So just to make sure that's clear. Okay.
Correct. Right. This is only for now.
Okay.
Okay, with those additions to the motion, are there any other discussions?
I have a question. Sorry,
Oh, okay.
I don't think it will change the vote or anything, but I do have a question. Would it be something for us to kind of look into to continue a way for people that are not a part of the advisory committee to be able to join in virtually? Just, I don't know, for the sake of like mentioning a drive time, and I don't know. I'm just wondering from like a technical standpoint if I should be kind of thinking ahead of looking at different ways people can virtually see what's happening, even if they're not super participatory as a member.
I mean, it should already be on the website, wherever it is we post the meetings, instructions for participating remotely. I would think that would be legally incumbent upon us.
Right, it is. I mean, I'm so sorry. I mean, when we do eventually go back, I guess, like, is that something that we would maybe forever have a virtual option? I know that's kind of sort of getting to that hybrid thing, but I didn't know if it was talking about members being able to do that, or if that's just a thought for the future, if we're in person, but maybe a participant just likes to see what's going on. But
as much as I dislike having to always go back, make everything a legal issue, I thought there were rules about whether we could meet anything other than in person anyway, that this is sort of like an emergency order that we're getting to do this, isn't it?
There are ways that you can meet virtually, but there are rules, and that goes back to what Sandra was saying. You have to be visible, and it has to be audible. The public has to see you, and they have to hear you for you to be able to make a vote. If one of those things are gone, then you can't do it. You can't vote.
That makes sense.
But I think going back to Karen's question, I think that I could see a system where it's like live streamed or it's on this, and then we allow not necessarily, maybe the chat is the way that people can participate by asking questions in the chat. And, we can have somebody monitor during the meeting. Does that work?
That's sort of what I was thinking. And like I said, I'm sorry, it's more for future when we do decide we're back to in-person.
Go back
That has
to
been the best time to
in-person.
ask the question.
I think it's probably premature to try to figure it all out right now.
We would like to place a time frame on the motion through the end of the year possibly, or for the next 6 months.
Good question.
I think we have to wait and see what happens with this new wave and how long it lasts.
Mhm.
I don't think that we really need to, Bruce. I think that by motion, we can change whenever we need to.
All right, very good. Well, in that case, we have a motion, we have a second and third. Any additional discussion or questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, one of the things I would request, whether we continue to do this remotely or in person, is that the documents that we're going to use for discussion purposes, if those could be distributed to the members prior to the meeting, so we would have a chance to review them and be prepared,
Here, here.
prepared for the meeting, I would
Here.
really appreciate that.
Here.
We
But by
do try to do
documents,
that.
Brian, you really mean slides, right?
Say again?
I think when you said documents, you really mean these slides, correct?
Yeah, anything that we're gonna,
Yeah.
I find myself really struggling when we get a slide on the screen.
Yeah, I'm just
And-
trying to
and-
clarify.
Yeah, but that would be helpful to me. I don't know. Plus, it helps you become more organized for the discussion part of our agenda if we know, what we're going to be talking about. So that's just one thing I'd mention to the committee.
So.
Understood.
in addition
We'll
to-
do our best.
And
in addition-
I'll just add to that, the agenda and the minutes should be sent out earlier, and you're doing a good job of that, like they came out a week ago or something like that. But what Brian's asking for, in other words, we understand they may not be prepared till the day beforehand, so, like 24 hours, I think is adequate. Those of us who are energized and looking, we'll look at them and look at, so it's not like you have to do it a week in advance, because you may just be putting your slides together that day, but at least if you can get them out the day before or that morning, I think that would be adequate for me.
Yeah, I agree, Greg. And that was my thought,
Okay.
something in advance.
I don't want to put pressure on staff, but if your slides are done that morning, then send them. Yeah.
I will make that a goal. I can tell you that I came in here screaming to try to finish this up before.
It's a
the
goal,
meeting.
not a requirement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. But I'll do everything we can do. And I'm sure Karen and Diane will as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that said, I believe we have all the discussion out of the way. We have a motion, second, a third discussion. We can do a vote by show of hands in accordance with the rules. So ayes, raise your hand. And if I can scroll across, anyone voting nay, please raise your hand. With that said, the motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Let's see, the next are the subcommittee reports. We have about 28 minutes. So we have, I guess, Sandra and Brian, who will give us reports on subcommittees. Who wants to go first?
There's staff reports also on the agenda.
I had a lot on the agenda. Sorry.
No, it was an ambitious agenda for sure. We're gonna have to move Karen's stuff up on the agenda. It's always last in a hurry. And it's some of the best stuff, so it should be up to top.
Sandra, do you want to give an overview of where you are with your subcommittee?
Actually, we have done a lot of work over the last couple of months, and it doesn't always show. So one of the things we asked Pete to do was to put together something that looked at the recommendations out of the report, the effect they would have if they could be implemented, and then some of the areas where we're looking at either possible implementation or the implementation doesn't make sense. And Pete has done a really good report in this effect.
You want me to take it away?
I certainly do.
Okay, so what we will be looking at is construction and demolition debris. And just as an overview, you can see that the source was the 10-year study, but it showed that there are a lot of divertible tons there. It's probably the biggest impact recommendations that we could work on in weight-wise. So you can see the different, divertible C&D debris, paper, yard waste, donation, drop-off, curbside recyclable. There's a lot of material in the C&D. So these are the 3 different recommendations that the study had. And one was for a C&D processing ordinance, which would require that C&D material be transported to a processing facility and sorted for these individual products with, corrugated cardboard, metals, appliances, asphalt, shingles, clean wood, and aggregates. And there's other materials there as well that would go into it. The second one was the reuse materials for road construction, and that is basically concrete and asphalt shingles. And I think that there's actually some other materials that can be used there that we just kind of started to scratch the surface. And then the waste reduction and reuse campaign, which I think could run concurrent with anything that we do. So those were the 3 sectors. So the first one that the committee looked at was the construction and demolition processing ordinance. So really what I tried to do here is show the difference in the process flow of the material. Coming from a construction or demolition site, you have mixed loads of C&D. So that excludes things that are like lead, that where they are already doing source separated on site of the construction or the demolition. So these would be the mixed loads. So you would have the mixed load, you'd have the transportation cost, which could be basically the same. And then you have the difference, one processing facility, and you have a tipping fee, and the processing cost, that fee is based upon the processing cost minus the value of the material. Then you have the landfill tipping fee. And then the end, with the processing facility, you have new products and uses, whereas on the other side, you have material value lost and you have airspace reduced. So therein lies the difference in the process of the way that it would work. We really kind of bounced around a lot on what this facility would kind of look like, and that just kind of breaks it down as basic as we can. There's a lot more to it. So everything that we talked about, these are some of our findings. Number 1, a processing facility is mechanically feasible. It takes place in a lot of places in the country, and it has taken place in Louisville Metro before. Some of the issues are some commodities have a negative value or no end use. Probably the biggest thing there is the no end use. Sometimes a negative value material is actually, it doesn't really play on to the success of a C&D processing facility if the value is less than what it would be for disposal. So whereas just an item would cost $40 at a disposal facility, but it costs $20 and it's recovered, there is some value there that could be taken advantage of, that $20 difference. The current commodity values may not support operation financially without being significantly more than landfill disposal fees. When you look at the combined stream of incoming materials, the values, we think, and it really changes with commodities and what's going on in the community, that it would be significantly more than disposal fees. Again, commodity values need not be positive, but less than disposal. All-in-one dumpsters could be beneficial in some construction and demo projects doing lead. And, you know, you have some customers out there that want to do lead, but there isn't any space for dumpsters, multiple dumpsters. In this regard, you would be able to have one dumpster and still be able to get your lead points. So there was some advantages there. So we had multiple people and stakeholders to kind of discuss and educate us. And what we've come up with is the committee decided to take a roadmap approach to eventually making it easier to site a facility. And that would focus at first on three main components to ensure end uses and demand, which should drive value for materials. And those three are going to be concrete, shingles, and drywall gypsum board. So that's where we're going to start our work. And there's good uses for concrete. There's good uses for shingles, just with a caveat. Drywall is probably one of the bigger issues that we have. And it's a big component of what's coming into these loads. So once that market is developed, it'll make it easier for us to put that facility together. And the target education campaign can be part of the entire process. So we're kind of working from the material demand to help it drive the industry and to get that diversion.
Could you define soil amendment, please?
Soil amendment, Matt Smith, you want to try that one?
If he doesn't, I will.
Okay, somebody.
I think it's just up his alley. That's kind of why I said it. I think you're muted right now, Matt. Matt, you're muted.
I don't think he's muted.
Uh-oh. Can't hear you, Matt. Okay, for the sake of time, while we work out technical difficulties, Sarah Lynn, you want to go ahead and do it?
Yeah, a soil amendment, according to Kentucky state regulations, is something that does enrich the soil, but it doesn't qualify as a fertilizer because it's not sufficiently rich. So for example, when MSD takes its sludge and turns it into a fertilizer, it's got nitrogen and phosphorus and potash, just like your regular garden center fertilizer has, but the quantities are so low, you're only allowed to legally call it a soil amendment. You can't call it a fertilizer.
Thank you very much. So just to kind of take a look at some of the materials, shingles. Shingles has been used to replace asphalt binder, which is very expensive. It's the liquid binder that holds it all together. The thought process was that it would melt in the process and create that binder. It's actually fallen out of favor with the Kentucky Department of Transportation over the last 3 to 4 years due to brittleness at a range of 3 to 5% in that mix. Now, there is some controversy there because some of the shingle processors that I've talked to, well, I'm going to say one because that's all we have in town now. We had 3. Felt like that people were kind of adding too much for a financial kind of incentive. So they were adding too much, which caused the asphalt to become brittle, which caused roads and pavement to break down sooner, which gave it a bad name. That's part of the issue. And we went from a lot of shingles getting recycled to very little getting recycled over a fairly short period of time. So like I said, the number of processors is down to 1, and it's barely operating. Now, we are going to be meeting with Bluegrass Testing Labs, which I want to open up to anybody and everybody that wants to go. The gentleman's name is Scott Wire. He's kind of like the mad scientist of asphalt, and he has a lot of experience trying to find better ways to improve the material and to recover and use other materials in asphalt. So we have a meeting with him. My understanding is that they're trying to attack this through the use of what's called rejuvenators. It's a material to add to the mix that would mobilize the binder in the shingles, which would again put it as favorable. And part of that is the next part of that is once it's approved, and we think that you can still use shingles at a lower level, but convincing the powers or the people that bid these projects that it's okay, that you can still use it at a certain level, or you can use it with this rejuvenator, and we can start to recycle shingles in bigger quantities again. Concrete, it is readily recyclable with many end uses already in the community, which is great. It's less expensive for virgin material for customers, so there's really not much reason that it shouldn't be used for many projects, including road construction, drainage projects, MS3 culverts, and to name a few. It's not used as extensively as it could be because engineers are less likely to use it because of a perceived quality and liability. If they use a recycled product and the road fails, are they going to be, is the recycled material going to be the blame? So we have a hurdle to overcome in convincing them that it's really the same material. So it is, concrete's no less valuable and less quality than virgin materials. Education, the track that we need to take here is education of government and construction industry so that they understand that the material can be used and that they should bid it and that it is less expensive than virgin material. That's the low-hanging fruit. Drywall and gypsum board found in large quantities in the loads from construction and demolition material. It's readily recyclable. It really is. With uses to include a soil amendment, a conditioner or fertilizer, animal bedding, bulking agents, soil remediation and stabilization, cement additives. There's a lot of uses for the material once it's been recovered. The problem is it's not utilized in the Louisville region. So this is a open market. If we can resolve this, we resolve the issue of one of the major components of incoming loads of C&D material, and it begins to have a value. Now, when on those incoming loads, it's always the drywall that comes in is different from new construction versus demolition waste. New constructions, it's not painted. It's easier to remove the paper fraction from the material. And, you know, to make this work, you have to have some special equipment and to get that paper off, which would include a building with a dust control system. You can imagine the dust control that's coming out of that. So we would have to overcome that capital cost, and I'm not sure how much one of these cost, but I think that we can definitely find some local uses. And I think Matt, if he could talk, would tell us that that's something that could be developed in this region. The other component, yeah, I think he is. The other components, and I kind of listed these in a little bit of an order that we would take after those first three. Wood, which is found in large quantities in these loads, and it's about 50-50. Clean wood is in those loads a lot. Clean wood is very recoverable and usable. Now, when you get into painted wood or you get into wood that is treated, it's not. Or you get to pressed wood, it's not as value, although some pressed wood can be used. Metal, obviously, that's always a good thing, but as everybody knows, when the price for metal goes up, there's less in the incoming loads. And then the residuals, and that's the workers' lunches, municipal solid waste. You have the fines, the small stuff that can't be sorted and contained. And then, yeah, the unsortable waste that comes in that's maybe multiple products in one unit that you can't separate. Oops. And then the waste reduction campaign would run concurrent. So that's really basically the track that the committee has decided to take. We're going to try to make the materials start to work the problem from a material point of view to find end uses for the material, which should make the C&D processing facility more viable and educate throughout. So that's the idea of the committee, that we would want to give the full committee and then on to the 109 board for their blessing to move in that direction.
Pete, could I request that you send your slideshow out to all of the committee members, please?
I can, absolutely.
I would appreciate that. Because you kind of blazed through it. So thank you.
I have an idea that I'm wondering if anybody's looked into or knows of anybody who's looked into it. As I understand it right now, when LG&E scrubs its flue gases, it creates a somewhat drywall-like material where the calciferous material binds with the acid, and that they are selling it to farmers right here in Kentucky who are using it as a soil amendment. And I'm wondering if they're willing to take it from a coal-fired power plant, might they be willing to take it from the waste stream if somebody's truly keeping an eye on the details? Have y'all heard of anybody exploring that idea?
You're talking about gypsum, right?
Beg your pardon?
You're talking about drywall, right? Gypsum?
Yes.
Yes, agricultural fields do take that. It's used in northern Indiana on some applications.
Okay.
It's generally all new construction drywall, but it is drywall.
And I could imagine that, you know, if we have a market for it along those lines in Kentucky, that LG&E's quantity has just totally saturated the demand, but might be worth looking into.
Well, that comes into educating the agricultural sector as to the value of the material.
Mm-hmm.
Drive that demand.
Any other comments, Sandra, on your committee's efforts?
You're muted, Sandra.
I just said, no, I have nothing else. That's our report.
Thank you so very much. Very nice. We'll give Brian Slade the floor now, and he can report on the ICI self-haul subcommittee.
Yeah, you might want to have Chairman Greg report. He's on the call, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
That's all right.
Sorry.
I'm glad to help.
Thanks. Either one of us. And I actually ask you to come in and whenever you want to, but our meeting, we just had a meeting an hour ago, and it was productive in terms of a lot of discussion back and forth, but we didn't get past our first slide. We don't have a presentation to give to the meeting right now. We got a little bit stuck on the fact that there's some legal issues in terms of what to do. I mean, the legal liabilities of the people that handle material. In other words, if I'm summarizing rightly, it's like if you take in shingles from the side of a house and siding, and it's got lead paint. If you process that, is there a legal liability for processing that? So the companies that do this had some concerns about that.
I would, Greg, I would want to add that this is in the self-haul recommendation.
Okay.
And that is material from
Right.
residential cars, pickup trucks, and
Right.
trailers.
Right, and that's the uniqueness of it. Right. So we did ask staff to look at that, and we asked the companies are waiting. The lawyers could get back within a day or never get back or say it can't be done, is my understanding of the outcome. So I don't know if anybody wants to add anything else to that.
With this, are we talking about like self-haul, or are we talking about like requiring some sort of, separation requirement to like demolition companies? Because, I think we're talking about two very different waste streams. If it's a demo company versus self-haul, which will have some amount of these materials, but is largely, residential trash and junk. We're not talking about, 5,000 truckloads of construction and demolition debris.
Okay.
Yeah, I would definitely say that they are different from the streams. They may be some of the same material, but processed totally, or handled in the recommendations totally differently.
we just stayed on the self-help, but then like it was also brought up about the landfill, that people bring stuff there, but there's not much value to it. They've already taken that out. And so that was the only specific company that we talked about.
The only thing I would like to add, Greg,
Yes.
I believe the request of the committee from the individual who wanted to take commercial hazardous waste has been kind of falls in line with what we were discussing with regard to, the household hazardous being combined by a company and hauled in and thus becoming a commercial solid waste. So, I mean, there was some similarities there, I guess is all I'm saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Yeah, I think that's, unless anybody wants to add, that was at the committee meeting, subcommittee.
No, thank you. I think it was a pretty accurate overview. The next item on the agenda, and we're running right up to the wall here, Karen. You've got 6 minutes, enforcement update, education update.
Well, I guess there's no enforcement update. I'll just say that. I have basically an education presentation that was kind of at the request during a residential C&D subcommittee, specifically from Sandra, to be able to share what the education team is doing. And so we kind of did that. I think that there are slides that can be fleshed out even more. I think that there are sections of what we do that can be pulled to, if someone wanted to have a presentation about a certain program, then it's like, I felt like it was a good task to have because I can use it in many ways. But I will go ahead, I guess, if we're okay with it, and share. And I've learned my lesson. I'm going to stop putting myself at the end. Let's see. Here we go. All right. I have too many screens. I'm trying. Okay, can you all see that?
Yes.
Whoops, sorry. I need that little button that says to start. Okay. So I'll go through this and I will go pretty fast. And then at your all's suggestion, we can do more of these kinds of presentations as requested, I guess. But okay, that's it. Right. All right. So I wanted to first of all share that we do have louisvillewastedistrict.org as a district website. Hopefully you all are aware of that. It does have information about the board and the advisory committee. It includes, if you don't have an invite, you can always go there to look for links to the meetings or even recordings from past ones and agendas and minutes. And listed there are other things that are on that website. And so you all can do that later if you want to look more at the website. We do use social media a lot, and I wanted to kind of share kind of how I do that. I have a Nextdoor account that is under Louisville Waste District. That's because Metro has their own, and it's sort of a combo for all Metros. So I decided I would prefer to speak on behalf of the Louisville Waste District, and I'm mostly doing education that is applicable to the entire county. So that's what I do. And it has my picture and my name and title. So that one is very specific. I can also share to the entire area, or I can go by neighborhood, or if I click the service areas, that kind of hits the urban services district, which I've done recently, trying to talk about the recycling carts. I also use Facebook and Twitter. There's 2 accounts. One for Public Works is Lou Pub Works. And the one for the district is called No Waste Lou. And if I make a post on one, because maybe, if I was talking about the recycling carts, I've kind of stuck with Public Works area. But if I make an educational post on No Waste Lou, I go to the Public Works one and share it. So they kind of go back and forth. And then YouTube, I did create a YouTube channel for No Waste Blue. So that is where, if you have ever gone back to watch a meeting recording and it's on YouTube, it's housed there on our No Waste Blue page. Any videos that are made by Metro TV for Public Works, or if I've made a video and I want to house it for Public Works, it actually goes on the Louisville Metro TV channel, and there's a playlist for Public Works. Some of my videos are actually on both. I haven't really used it as a social media tool, but it can be. And then of course, Recycle Coach, you all know about that. And I can use that to, there's calendar for events also. So if you don't have services within the city, you can still use that calendar and get reminders for like our pop-up drop-off events, or when I've done webinar series, those go on that calendar. And then the What Goes Where search tool is very useful, and you can set notifications. So what I did here on these slides that have the little yellow thing at the top there, it's basically a slide that shares the general idea of these recommendations, and then a bullet point that shares how are we, how is anything I'm doing correlated with that. So for this one, for waste reduction and reuse education for residential, I just put that the No Waste Wednesday posts that I do every week and the No Waste webinars have correlated with this, this one. And then the No Waste Ambassador Program, we did that during COVID. So I was pretty proud to have, now we have 9 active ambassadors, and we got a state grant to build a resource library. So I can talk more in detail about that, but we have a few that have been helping out with some of our events and programs. And it's been really great to have a volunteer base, even small. And I'd like to train another group this coming year. The Recycle Right program I've talked about before, so I won't go into too many details, but we want to have a future ongoing program. So we want to have a different name that encompasses all of the waste collection, because we can actually do some programming that might help educate, and that some items are not allowed in other waste streams, like yard waste and the garbage, things like that. So we have some results. I might rather do more information on this later, but I will say we just finished up tagging in the Shawnee neighborhood, and we were really pleased to see some good results. And what you see here on the left is green tags. That means they had nothing wrong with their recycling, and we only had from the first tagging, we only had I think that says 22% got a green tag, and then when we did it the 4th time, it jumped to 48%. So we were pretty pleased that that many people changed their ways. And then the yellow and red tags decreased from the 1st to the 4th. And on the right hand one, it shows the contaminants and how that had gone down. For example, we saw a lot of bag recycling, and that went down pretty drastically. So that probably deserves its own presentation. Compost bin sales and workshops. We haven't done as many workshops. We did some virtual things. And then we are still selling bins and rain barrels just as people request, and they can pick them up at our office. Our school outreach program, of course, didn't do well last year because we couldn't go to the schools, but we did some virtual programming, and we do want to make this promoted more as we get more and more into in-person school again. And this is a screenshot of one of our flyers that we've made. So I have a lot of things I would like to do with school programs that it just feels a little bit like there's barriers for that right now. The new recycling carts. If you live in our urban services district, you should know all about these. So this was some of our materials that got sent out, cart packets attached to the carts. And we are in a phase currently of bringing carts to those people that were missed. There's all kinds of variables and reasons why it wasn't completely, people say, well, I do recycle. I should have gotten a cart. Okay. So we're kind of in the phase of fixing some of that. And it's just taking some time, but for the most part, everybody's excited to get their cart. Here's another slide showing that the CART grant, our Recycle Right program, school programs, and composting workshops correlate with this recommendation for expanded marketing for recycling and composting. Our pop-up drop-offs, I know I've talked to you guys about these before. This is our basic chart I keep updating every time we have one that shows how many participants we have, and then how much of each material is being dropped off, and the totals at the bottom. So I'd be happy to send more of these slides out to you so you can look at it closer. But that's our schedule. We have one this Saturday at Metro Fleet Services on Newburgh Road. There's a few pictures I've shown. We do a zip code map after each one. So this year, the red is where the most people came from, and the star is where the event was. And it's very much, even though we're getting people from all over, the majority of the people are really coming from the surrounding area. Newburgh is, well, I think more people are willing to go to that route, you know, since it's centrally located. And then here was Eastern High School.
Are you finding that the proximity to the interstate is a factor?
I don't know. I hadn't really thought about that, but definitely for Newburgh, I don't know if it's because it's just central or because it's right off the Watterson there, but we, you definitely see more people coming from all over. And then we've completed a full rotation of the 3 areas, and then June started over again at Sun Valley again. And here's again, you know, Sun Valley's a little harder to get to. If you obviously you don't want to drive from the east end all the way there. So
that was the thought that inspired the question, actually.
Yeah, some people apparently do. And then the pop-up drop-off events promote on-site sorting in order to recover as much material as possible. So this is kind of correlated to the self-haul recommendation. And we're still in a planning stage, but we have grand ideas for business outreach and through multifamily complexes. And there are 2 recommendations. One, they're both about technical assistance, but one is kind of under multifamily, which kind of back to our discussion before, can sometimes be considered like an ICI or commercial standpoint, or you can kind of put it under residential. It's a little odd, but we really want to do more of the multifamily outreach. And then there's the technical assistance under ICI, which would be more of the businesses. So we haven't really done much with that, but we really want to. And then this is a slide we've used before about the anti-litter campaign that we talked about at one point, and it got a little bit stalled out, but I threw it on there to not forget that as we move forward with anything, it kind of came about more when the Clean Collaborative group was started, because it's right along with that initiative. So if anything ever comes of that, I can also add to this presentation. So again, I blew through that, but just for the sake of time, can't ever find the, there we go, stop sharing. Just for the sake of time, but I wanted you to see that I don't mind making a PDF that I can send those out to you so you can look, but just know that I'm going to continue to update those slides as we do more, as I, you know, do more about some of those programs, or just kind of fleshing it out even more. And if there's anything you saw there that you think would be beneficial to hear more details about, you can always request that for a future meeting as well.
Karen, once again, excellent work, as with Pete. But if you would, your slideshow, if you could send that out to the committee members so that we could look at it and give it the proper time necessary to read, I would greatly appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other questions from committee members?
Just, I agree. Good work.
Well, hearing none, next item on the agenda obviously is the public input. Do we have any guests on the webinar call that wish to say anything? Hearing none, we'll go into announcements. The next 109 board meeting is Wednesday, July 28th, from 5:30 to 7 p.m. And the
When?
subcommittee
I beg your
meetings.
pardon? Say when, please, again?
Yes, it's July 28th from 5:30 to 7 p.m.
Thank you.
And the subcommittee meetings, the residential / C&D, Tuesday, August 10th, from 2 to 3 p.m. And the ICI self-haul is Wednesday, August 18th, from 3:15 to 4:15 p.m. And our next scheduled advisory committee meeting will be Wednesday, August 18th as well, from 4:30 to 6 p.m. So mark your calendars. Once again, I'd like to thank everybody for their input, their discussion, all of the thoughts that came out today. I thought it was a good meeting on top of a good meeting we had prior to with the ICI self-haul group. So, does anyone have any other comments that they would like to make? Hearing none, do I have an motion to adjourn?
I
So
so
moved.
move. Supper time.
And I have a second. I have a motion from Sarah Lynn Cunningham and a second, I believe, from Sandra. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Thank you also very much for your time.
Bye, everybody.
Everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Bruce.